Hi, I'm James, and today I want to take you through some information and some help for the active 1800 pressure washer and pressure washers in general. So we get a lot of questions around the performance of the unit, and let's say there's not enough pressure to do the job that they're trying to do. First thing I'd say would be, if you have any type of heavy duty task, whether it involves kind of stripping paint or cleaning a very large surface area in a short amount of time, you really probably want to get a gas machine. Gas machines are just a lot more powerful. They're going to have a lot more pressure and a lot more flow, and you'll be much happier using that type of equipment. Now, for our units here, there are a couple things that you want to check to make sure the unit's working properly. First thing you want to do is make sure all the connection points are solid and nothing is leaking. The second thing you want to do is you want to, while you're doing that inspection, you want to look at all the seals as we described before and make sure all the seals are intact so you're getting a proper seal both at the gun, on the machine, and at the garden hose portion. Next, you also want to make sure that all of the filters are clean and clear of debris. So you'll see here there's some debris there. You want to make sure the filter and make sure the connection, nothing's blocking in there, or there's no mineral buildup that would affect the seal of the unit. And last but not least, you want to make sure there's no kinks in the hose, whether it's your garden hose or whether it's the hose from the machine to the gun. I think once you eliminate all those things, then you can be pretty confident that your machine is running properly. Last but not least, you want to make sure you're using the right tip for the task, okay? So we include 3 tips with our unit. It's a 0 degree, a 15, and a 40 degree. The 0 degree just describes the angle of the water coming out of the spray tip at that moment with that nozzle. So 0 degree is going to give you like a pencil-like jet, good for cleaning stubborn stains or for writing your name in cement or something like that. The 15 degree is kind of a balanced spray pattern where you're going to get a good degree of pressure across a wider surface, so it's good for a variety of tasks. And the 40 degree is going to have the biggest kind of fan-like application, and that's going to have cleaning power over a larger surface area, but it's going to have less effective pressure. So make sure you choose the right tip for the task. So when you're experiencing or experience a power issue with the pressure washer, I want you to check a couple things. First, some background. So most North American household circuits run on 120 volts, about 60 hertz, and breakers start to trip at about 15 amps. Most DIY pressure washers are rated around 14 amps. Because of spikes, they don't want to start tripping breakers. We typically run ours a bit lower than 14 amps so that we can protect the motor and protect breakers. So the first thing you want to check is that your circuit is working correctly, and also you only have the pressure washer connected to one plug and one circuit, because if you have a whole bunch of things plugged in or it's on an extension cord, you may not have enough power to adequately power the unit. That's the first thing. The second thing you want to check for is that you're not using an extension cord. If you use an extension cord with these units, it actually puts more of a load on the system and makes it easier to trip a breaker. So you want to check that as well. So when you plug it in, you want to make sure that you see a green light there. Right now you don't see it, but if you press a test and then reset, you'll see the green light come on, which means the pressure washer is ready for use. And then after that, what we'll do is we'll just turn this button on quickly, so we know there's power running to the machine. So when you encounter issues with your pressure washers, run this electrical test with the GFCI, make sure the green lights are on, and when you turn on the pressure washer itself, don't run the pump more than 3 seconds because that might damage the pump. But doing this will ensure that you don't have any issues with both your electrical system or the motor itself. Another common condition that you'll experience is you'll hear the pump and the motor pulsating or surging on and off, on and off. And that's, again, not a normal condition. So there's a couple things that you definitely want to check. First thing you want to do is check all of your connections to make sure you don't have any leaks. And included in that is checking kind of all the connection points to make sure all the seals are intact so you get a good seal both on the garden hose, on the hose of the machine, and the hose of the gun. If you're using any aftermarket accessories, make sure that you have the proper fitting size, M2215. That's the size that we include with the unit, and that's what's going to work well. As mentioned before, a lot of aftermarket accessories are M2214, and they're just not going to work properly on the unit. As well, a lot of people are using aftermarket foam cannons on our unit, and you want to make sure as well that the rating or the orifice size on the foam cannons, we give a 1.24 size, 1.25 orifice size. The other guys are using things like 1.2 or 1.1, and they're all going to have a different impact on the unit. So first thing to do if you're using aftermarket accessories is take them all off, put back the original accessories to see if it's working properly, and if it is, then you know you have a problem with one of your accessories. So I want to describe a condition where there's inadequate water supply or inconsistent water supply and what that sounds like. Basically, you'll be using your pressure washer and the water pressure will keep dropping while the sound of the motor will keep rising. So it'll sound like the unit's working harder, but actually less is happening. And you want to check for two things. One, you want to check your water supply is consistent and not being choked off, or maybe you have a kink in the hose supplying the pressure washer, which can result in not enough water going into the unit, and essentially you'll be pumping air. So those are two things to check for when you have that type of condition. So the Active 1800 comes with its own foam cannon. Again, a lot of people are using this foam cannon or they're putting an aftermarket foam cannon, and you just want to make sure if you're using an aftermarket foam cannon that the orifice size is no smaller than a 1.24. And if you use an orifice size that's smaller than that, then you may get some funny behavior from the machine because it's causing the unit to surge and kind of create more pressure than the system was designed to have. The other thing as well is that once you do use up or you're finished with the foam cannon, you want to run the system without any foam or without any soap, just to make sure you clear out all the soap from the cannon itself so you don't get any buildup inside the valves here, which will compromise performance the next time you go to use the foam cannon. As I'd mentioned before, the nozzle, the 3.7 nozzle that we've chosen here is the ideal mix of pressure and flow, about 1,000 PSI and about 2.0 GPM. And that's what comes with the machine. We know a lot of users have been mixing and matching nozzles though. So this guy here is a 3.0 nozzle, and you'll see when we put it on, visually they all look very similar. Again, that's why it's important to understand which nozzle that you're putting on. At a 3.0, what it's doing is it's closing, or call it shrinking, the orifice size where the water comes out in order to get more pressure out of the system. But what that's also doing is it's causing more of a current draw on the unit. So the amperage might spike to 14, 14.5, or even 15. And the closer you get to that 15 mark, not only is it harder for the motor, but you might kind of trip your breaker. And that's what a lot of customers are experiencing when they're changing the nozzles. Then we attach the other side of the M2215 onto the pressure washer unit itself. Here at the back, I'm going to inspect the seal again to make sure everything's intact. Insert it, make sure I'm applying pressure and threading it again. Threading it tightly, make sure it's going smoothly, and hand tighten as well. Okay? Next thing I'm going to quickly do, I'm going to turn on the water, so you might have to go back to your faucet. I'm going to turn on the water. I'm going to visually inspect to make sure there's no leaks and doesn't appear to be anywhere here, here, and here. And I'm just going to turn it on for a second. And what this is doing is just purging the system of any air. I'm also making sure there's no kinks in the hose of the garden hose or the hose that goes from the gun to the unit itself. Now it's time to plug in the unit. So when I'm plugging in the unit here, this is called the GFCI. I'm going to run a test and reset, and you'll see the green light come on. That means the unit's ready for use. Turn on the unit. You'll hear the pump pressurize, which means it's ready for use, and you're ready to go. So by going in a step-by-step fashion and making sure all your seals and connections are correct, you shouldn't have any leaking and you should have great performance. So here we have the standard hose that comes with the unit, but you'll see when we get closer, the seal has actually been damaged here. So you'll see there's a bit of a chunk that's missing out of the seal there, and that's going to impact how good the seal is for the whole system. So we're going to install it here the same way, and you'll notice that it installs the same and feels the same. So unless you have a visual inspection, it'll be hard to tell that something's wrong. So that's done tightly. And again, we're going to install it. Install it to the gun here. We're going to, again, turn on the water. We're going to try to purge the system again. Make sure all that air is out of the system. And you can see already here, the unit is starting to leak. So you can almost see there the unit is starting to leak, and you'll see the water coming out of the hose. And that's just with that little kind of nick in the seal, and you'll see this much water leaking. And of course, if we were to turn on the unit itself, you'll hear the unit is having a hard time pressurizing, and that's where you'll get this unit cycling on and off, which is not normal, okay? So you'll see how much water there is leaking. I release the trigger, and you'll hear it cycling on and off. And you want... So when you hear that pump and motor cycling on and off like that, there's definitely a leak in the system somewhere. And so you'll have to check all the fittings and try to identify where it is. But for sure, that's not normal. And so if you hear it, you know something's wrong. So a lot of times, people see this leaking and it looks like the unit is leaking from the middle of the unit, where in fact it's just leaking from the hose. So the unit itself is not leaking here, it's the damaged hose connection that is causing the leak. And so we get a lot of customers calling saying their pump is leaking, when in reality, it's just the hose. So here's an example of how similar hose connectors can look. Here is the one that comes with the unit. It's an M2215, and here is a hose connector that comes with many well-known brands and aftermarket units, an M2214. Visually, you really can't tell the difference between the two, which is why we believe a lot of customers are getting confused and trying to use them on this unit. And what you'll see here is, if you force it on, you will actually be able to thread the unit on to the gun. So I think this is again why users feel confused as to what's going on. So we have that there, and again, this hose is a lot shorter, but again, the fittings are M2214, and this unit here, this will also thread onto the unit itself. And so it's very understandable why a customer would feel like they have the proper fittings when in reality they don't. And of course, what this is going to cause is all sorts of leaking. So we'll turn on the unit and show you exactly what we mean. So again, turning on the water, purging the system a bit. So far so good, but you already notice some water starting to seep out of the hose here. And that's not even under pressure, that's just with the garden hose on. When I turn on the unit again, so what we have here, we're going to turn on the unit. You'll notice the leak. You'll notice a tremendous amount of leaking. And you'll also notice that the motor and the pump didn't cycle on and off, and it just kept running. So that's a different type of case than when we had a damaged seal. In this instance, the motor and pump just keep running, because it can't pressurize, and you'll see the amount of leaking is quite substantial. So these are the things to look out for when you put on the wrong hose, and in reality it has nothing to do with the pressure washer itself. So if you have any more questions on the Active 1800 or pressure washers in general, or you have any suggestions or you have any ideas, please leave a comment or a question below and we'll try to get back to you. Thanks.